This episode is brought to you by Columbia Sportswear. It's snowing again, and that wind chill is killer. But you're not worried about that because you shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection. It's warmth perfected with tiny gold dots that reflect your body heat inside and protect you from the cold outside. No snow or chilly temps can stop you now. Go out anyway. Shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection now at Columbia.com/infinity.
Instacart helps you get beer and wine delivered in as fast as an hour. So, whether you need to fill the cooler for tailgate season or fill your glass for Pinot by the fire season, you can save time by getting fall sips delivered in just a few clicks. Visit instacart.com or download the app to get free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum order $10. Additional terms apply. Must be 21 or over for alcohol delivery where available. Instacart. Add life to cart.
I've been in dogs since 1991. We breed dogs that we want to train. I was out here in western Nebraska riding Harleys and training dogs. I don't sugarcoat anything, and if you don't like it, tough.
Welcome to another podcast episode of the Flatlander Kennels podcast with Chris Jobman. We are joined once again with Ray Voigt. Last time we talked about marking. If you haven't heard that, make sure and check it out. Today we have gathered a bunch of questions on the Facebook group, and if you haven't joined the Facebook group yet, it is Flatlander Kennels podcast. Come join us. That way you can interact with everyone and answer questions and see things that we post over there. So let's go ahead and turn it over right now to Chris and Ray.
Hi guys, Ray, thanks for joining us again. And we got the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Ray Voigt joining us. We're going to do a bunch of questions and answers here. Ray, how are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks again for having me. Really enjoyed the last one and looking forward to hopefully answering some questions for some people and having some more good dog discussion.
Good. Well, we got these questions off our Facebook page. If you guys want any questions answered by me or some guests or whoever, go ahead and put those on the Facebook page, and we'll get to them eventually. Not going to happen right away, but we will get to them. I'm going to let Elliot take this over. He's going to read the name of the person submitting it, the question, and then we're just going to answer. We're going to try to go as quickly as we can. We got about 10 of them, 8 to 10 of them we need to do, and we're going to try to stay on topic. A little bit better than Chris and I last time, and we're just going to keep going.
All right, let's kick it right off. This first one is Jake Wirtz, and he asks, how do you deal with a dog that is vocal on the honor bucket? Dog is steady on the honor and steady and non-vocal while working, sometimes barks at first bird thrown while honoring, and sometimes is only vocal when the dog is sent.
Ray, I'm going to let you take that one, buddy.
I was just going to say the same thing to you. I think that's a tough one, and I think there's several factors. One would be how often do you get to honor in training? If the only time the dog, if you train by yourself and with some devices and it's hard to replicate the excitement of a test. And if that's the only time that this happens, then it's going to be very difficult. But my recommendation would be to try to get in with a bigger group or some place where you can try to replicate a little bit more of a test setting and spend extra time on the honor. I mean, I don't know that just, burning them and correcting them is going to make it better. I think it has to be a patience factor, and that dog's just going to have to sit it out. I'm not saying you let them get away with it, but it's going to have to be some sort of combination of maybe some correction when they get vocal and the repetition of being able to put that dog in that position enough times to try to get them to understand the difference of what's acceptable and what isn't.
I'll tell you a couple things that I have done over the years. Jake, what you really need to do is you need to get to a training group and whether it be drive here or wherever you want to go, you really need to get up, go to a training group like you're going to a hunt test. And when you get to that training group, it's going to be very hard for you to do, but make it look like a test as much as possible. When you come out, get your dog ready like you normally come out. Do not put a collar on your dog. Do not correct your dog for anything. Get up, run your setup. Whether that dog, no collar. I'm talking zero collar, right? Zero collar. And whether your dog, is creepy, now you're worried about the honor. It's what you said. You're worried. So let's focus on just the honor. If that dog has cash refusal, it doesn't really matter. Don't yell at it like act like you're at a hunt test. Run it just like you're at a hunt test. And then when you move to the honor, just like a hunt test, now when that dog gets vocal, I would probably get physical with the dog. Maybe grab its muzzle, say quiet, sit, maybe grab it. Because now that dog thinks it's at a hunt test and you've tricked it. You've traveled, you stayed at the Holiday Inn Express, you went to a hunt test, he thinks he's at a hunt test. That's how you try to trick that dog. We do that all the time. When we go to the Grand or the National, the first day, none of us run with a collar on, because if we got any kind of dogs with needed line corrections, that's where we'll get it, is the very, very first day. As soon as that dog hears a yip or a yipe from another dog in your training group, it's over. They realize they're training. It's done. So you got to try to trick that dog somehow. Another thing, and that has worked. Another thing I've done is and you're going to have to do a training group again. I have staked out a dog on the honor, because you have a working dog, an honor dog, and then I just move over and stake your dog out all day. And let it just watch and watch and watch. And then if it starts to get vocal, you give them a correction, whether it's a healing stick or something like that, whatever you decide to do. And I've done that so much where the dogs, by the end of the day, aren't even watching the birds coming out. They're looking the other way. So like Ray said, you've got to get lots and lots and lots of repetitions, and there's no other better way than to stake that dog out close to line, and you manage that dog, and you just sit there. And if you can find a training group with 50 dogs, you run fifth or sixth dog, and you let it sit there all day long. And if it makes noise, then you give it a correction.
Right. And I like the idea of, personally, I like the idea of more of it coming from you versus a collar. I think that I think correcting a dog for noise with a collar almost amps them up even more, creates some anxiety, and tends to even cause more noise than getting the desired response.
Because here's the thing, Jake. That dog has to be worried about you snatching it up. And if it thinks it's at a test or something and you still snatch it up, he may think twice about it, right? So, and then stake that dog out, and your correction should be more of a physical type correction. Not like Ray said, not a collar, but more of a physical type correction. And I'm going to tell you, that's a really hard one to fix. It's extremely hard one to fix. But and then you may want to stop running some tests for a while if that's developing, and you need to really rethink what's going on. Is the dog super young? Is it high power? What you need to think about what's causing that but to happen. So
yeah, that was exactly what I was about to say. Is I would stop running it, stop putting it in the position in the trial or in the test to make a mistake that you can't do anything about, and just try to recreate it and try to get it to come out in training. And the worst thing would be starting to work on it in training, making a couple corrections, maybe starting to get a little bit better, and then you put him in a test and he gets away with it. You just went right back to square one, if not further.
And even worse.
Yeah.
Even worse. And another thing, too, if you're running, and I think it's Jake, I know who it is, if you're running HRC, there's nothing wrong with running Saturday only or Sunday only. Maybe it's quiet on Saturday, but Sunday it's really wound up because it's day 2. Just run one day. There's nothing that says you have to run 2 days. And at the test, I find it hard to believe that the dog is perfect. It's a working dog, but super vocal as an honor dog. So if you go to a test, like Ray said, and if that dog slips up at all as a working dog, creeping, anything at all, you have got to pick that dog up before you get to the honor.
And one more thing to add on to that, Chris, would be I would try to make depending on the age and stage of the dog, but if it's a more advanced dog, I would be trying to challenge that dog in training. I would be making all my tests harder. I would challenge that dog more. Challenging them more doesn't mean more correction, but it means setting up harder, more difficult tests. And that inadvertently is going to make that dog think a little bit more and maybe take them, have them just be a little bit calmer because they're worried about what's happening out in the field because they really got to buckle down and try. And I've seen that work for dogs that are a little noisy too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it almost takes their mind off what they're doing. It's almost like indirect pressure a little bit, Okay, next.
All right, next question comes from Hunter Rohnfelt. When asking for a whistle, what is a good way to fix a lazy sit? When she is heeling or close and I whistle, she sits right down, but sometimes at a distance you can watch her hear the whistle, take a couple more steps, then kind of sit to the side and look back at me.
Okay. Well, I'll begin this deal. Hopefully your basics are done right. Hopefully you've done everything in your power. But in the field, what I usually do is, you blow the sit whistle, and if you don't immediately see them shutting down and really trying to stop, I'll give them a collar correction followed by another sit whistle. Is what I would do.
Continuous or nick?
I don't like the nick mode. I call it a continuous nick. Mm-hmm. I use the continuous button, and that way I can control the length of the correction, or multiple corrections in a row.
Are you holding it down until the butt hits the ground, or is this?
You know what? It all depends on the dog. I've had dogs that you do that. They've come from other trainers and other places. If you do that, they jump all over the place. And then it's even worse. I've had some dogs you can give a little continuous nick and it firms them right up. If you got a really jittery type dog that doesn't handle pressure very well, it may make it worse by jumping all over the place with a continuous.
Okay.
I will sit, nick, sit, as I usually say. Ray, what do you think?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, some of those dogs, they'll almost, they can almost tense up with they'll almost like clam up with that constant continuous pressure where it almost makes them crouch more instead of getting their butt down faster. It's pretty similar. I mean, my correction would be blow the whistle when I read that effort of not trying to stop. I blow the second whistle with the correction where so very similar. So I toot. I start to see lack of effort. I blow a second whistle with the correction. As far as the crookedness, or my first thing would be to go back to the yard and do a pile or even a little bit longer distance pile where I could check it out, make sure they're sitting very crisply and straight at a smaller scale. I know you said it happens mostly at a distance, but you could go back if you do a pile. All of a sudden, if you let them go, you have a 30-yard pile, and you let them get 20 or 25 yards before you blow the whistle. You might see a real lack of effort to stop, and you can address it in a little more controlled environment than out at the end of a land blind. The crooked part, I've tended to do a little toot or a little like a half bow. You kind of duck down a little bit with a toot, and they start to and then as soon as they straighten up, you'd make sure you blow another whistle and make sure they're not continuing to come in, and just kind of straighten it. Again, I tend to try to teach that on the pile before out at 200 yards on the end of a blind, but that would be my deal. And once they understand that, if they sit real crooked, I mean, you could even do a little toot with a nick or that little dip with a nick, and they ought to understand to straighten up.
Yeah, and what listeners, what Ray's getting to is in sit to pile. I do the same thing you do. You blow the sit whistle, and they may be a little bit crooked, and you go tweet tweet like almost like a come in whistle as you bend down, and then when they are squared up, you go tweet and you stand up, and then in the field, and then when you get to the field, you can literally go tweet, and then I still do this on my advanced dogs to the day on some of them. I can just bend down a little bit, and they'll straighten right up, and then off you go. And then your pile work, you need to make sure, like that's a great tool too, is make sure the bumpers are visible. Cut mowed grass. The more visible they are, the more excitement it's going to be, the faster they're going to run, and you'll be able to work on your whistle sits a lot better that way.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to go back, if I see a problem creeping up, I tend to go back to the simplest form first to make sure everything checks out. And if I need to something like that where you're going to need a correction, whether it's a slow sit or a crooked sit or some other mechanical things, I just like to go back and basically revisit it and make sure they understand what that correction's for and how to properly turn it off, right? So whether you're getting a dog from somebody else or, we all love to think that all the basics are perfect on every dog, some of which, we've done, and we get a little lax on some stuff and we have to go back and fix something. But I'd like to go back to that simplest form, reintroduce the command correction sequence, how I want to do it, and make sure that dog understands what it's getting corrected for, how to properly turn that correction off. And it doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be perfect when you go out in the field, but it gives you a tool when you address it or when you use that correction in the field, the dog got to understand how to respond properly.
Correct. Simplify, check your steps, then move forward. All right.
This one ties right back into the same topic of sitting. Michael Fugit as asking, you guys were talking about making the pup sit with the lead rope on. I've heard different ways, and I have taught it a couple different of ways. How do you teach to sit, to whistle, and to get that snappy sit? He's not sure he understands with how the lead rope is tied into that, I guess.
Ray and I do it exactly the same way, I guarantee it. Ray, explain that to us.
Well, you're probably going to laugh at me. I actually have not used a rope. But what I've done is heeling, starting at heel, obedience, whistle, sit, whistle, sit, whistle, sit, whistle, sit, whistle. And then once they're starting to do that, I'll reinforce that with a collar, whistle, and a nick. And then I just start some simple recalls where sit the dog out in front of me, call them to me, stop them halfway, and get it real crisp. At this point, you've already taught them what the sit is at your side. You've been able to reinforce it. So if they start getting lazy or slow when they're coming into you, they should understand what a correction's for and get it real crisp there. And then when I start it on the pile, I usually start it on the return and then just start trying to stop them fairly quickly when I send them. If I don't get a stop them again. I'm certainly not opposed to the rope. I know a lot of people that have done it. I honestly have not put the number of dogs through the yard that you have. So if I had to do a bunch of them at once, I probably would use it. But you could better explain the timing and the with the rope on the sit.
Yeah. And we teach the same thing. Like when they're going through obedience, blow the, teach them to sit, blow the sit whistle, teach them to sit at your side. Let them understand what the whistle means. In pile work, we teach it first on their return as well. You're doing force to pile, that sort of thing. You just try to stop them on their return. And then in our yard work, when I did it, they drug around a long lead from through three-handed casting to force to pile to sit to pile. They drove that lead around all over the place. And when we would, they knew what the sit whistle was, but then after we did force to pile, we taught sit to pile. And now you got a dog, hopefully he's got really good positive momentum, some urgency to get to the bumpers. And we just put a long lead on him and leather gloves. And what you don't want to do is let that dog get a whole bunch of slack and then just grab that. You don't want to hurt him. That's not the smart thing to do. But what we do is now the dog knows to sit, coming back to you, knows to sit at your side. We kick him off with a back. And then, however far your pile is, it's not very far. And let's just say it gets halfway there, and you just gradually start, you blow that sit whistle, and you gradually start slowing them down. And if they stop, great. If they're stopping a little bit slower, blow it again and grab onto that rope and just slow them down real quick. And then if they're crooked, you can pull the rope. You can bend down, pull the rope with a tweet, and then stop them, kick them off with a back command, do it again. And we do that rope quite a bit. And I tell you what, it will make them sit real quick. But don't just say, hey, I'm going to go out and teach my dog to sit to a whistle today with a rope. You got to understand, these dogs have been dragging around this rope now, through 300 casting, forced pile, all those things. So it understands what that rope is. And I'm going to tell you, if you're going to teach a dog to sit to the whistle with a rope, you better be damn good at it. I have a scar on my ankle from that rope getting wrapped around it. And so does everybody that's ever worked for me. And the more you yell and scream to stop, the faster that dog runs. I can promise you that. And it hurts bad. But we do, that's how we do ours. But we teach it first. And then after we got forced to pile, we try to break that momentum with that rope. Not hurting them, but getting them to stop real quick. And I don't use a choke chain. Everybody uses choke chains or pinch collars. I don't like to use that because I don't want to hurt their throats or their esophagus. I just use a flat collar is what I do.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. This one is from R.J. Turner. He says, once you and the dog have a grasp on hunt test work, how to train for all excitements, should you wait till the dog is ready for finished and master to keep the dog from getting possible bad habits and just skip senior or seasoned? Or should you try to go through senior and seasoned and learn through it all?
Ray, do you want to start? Or do you
Sure,
want me to start?
I can start. I mean, I think in general, I feel like the more you take a dog to and expose them to a test at any level, whether especially with a young dog or with younger dogs, any chance that you have for them to do something wrong that you can enforce, you can create bad habits. So in theory, I would say I would wait till the dog was ready to run the advanced level, or but I do feel some people starting out, you have your first dog, you as a handler could use some experience. I mean, I can see a reason to come all the way up through the steps, but what I would say is I would have my dog almost ready for the next level before I put it in to start with. So if I'm running HRC with the first one is I'm sorry, I'm not as familiar with started. I would want my dog well past the started level before I'm going to expose them to running in a test. Same thing with seasoned and finished. So ideally, I would say I would try to expose them to test the least amount as possible. But if there's a strong reason, like this is your first dog, this is your first time going up through the, and you can get some experience, that would be fine. And the other caveat to that is if you start to go up through and you start to see something develop, you can quit and train for a while. You don't have to run every weekend once you start. So if you're running some seasoned or, you start to have some line manner issues or some cheating issues, stop running and take a period of time and just train the dog until they're over ready to run. I see a lot of people that try to, as soon as their dog can do a double, they're trying to run a senior or they're trying to run the seasoned, and get that dog over prepared. And then when they get to that test, it's going to be very easy for both of you.
For sure. And add more to that is, I always tell this to people, you can take an 18-year-old to a strip joint but it's still an 18-year-old in a strip joint, it's not going to end well. It's you take a highly energized, excitable dog, just because it's doing the work doesn't mean it's mentally ready to go to that strip joint. You're going to jail. So just because the dog can do that, just because the dog can run finish work, it has to mentally be ready for that excitement level, right? So it doesn't matter. It's not a race, and that's what drives me crazy. Everybody thinks it is. It's not a race. And how we do it here at the kennel, we start all of our dogs in the HRC program. And the reason for that is like Ray was just talking about, we can stop any bad behavior. We usually sometimes you run them in starter and get their 10 points. Most of the time we jump straight into seasoned. And in HRC, you can talk to your dog at the line. So if it starts creeping and moving, that's where you can stop any bad movement with sit, here, heel. So now that dog's first experience in the hunt test world is a positive one, because you are controlling the situation. You are stopping that dog. If you were to start in senior or master, you can't stop that dog at the line or you're failed. And most people aren't willing to give up their $100 entry fee because the dog is creeping 2 feet. All they care about is a ribbon, go and drink beer and handshake with your buddies. So most people aren't willing to grab that dog and stop that bad movement at an AKC event. So we start out in HRC because you can stop those bad habits. And how we do it here is we get their season title, we get their finish title, and then we go straight to master. We don't run senior. There's no reason to run started, season, finish, junior, senior, master. Because here's the thing, what's your goal? If your goal is to run the Grand or the Master National or All Age or whatever you want to do, why expose that dog to situations you can't control? You make them so test-wise, you can't even catch them. So you need to look at this dog as a career. You need to manage this dog's career. And you want this dog running at a high level when they're 8, 9, 10 years old. And anything built that's going to last very long wasn't built overnight. So you need to slow way down and take your steps and don't put those dogs, even if they're capable of passing starter or junior. I'm with Ray. Get them to that seasoned-ish senior level and then go do that, because now you've actually let that dog mentally mature, because mental maturity is way more important. Just because the dog misses a mark here, misses a mark there, and he fails, no big deal. Now, if that dog starts making noise, whining, barking, creeping, and you can't control it, then you're in trouble, if that makes sense.
Let me add as an amateur here, because I think that when you said, what is your goal is a really important thing. I think a lot of people that I see in HRC, I think that their goal is the environment. And for us amateurs that are not around other people who train a lot or not around professionals at all, going to these hunt test days is a really, really special atmosphere, a really special experience. So I think if your goal is just to get to finish, maybe your goal is just the environment itself, and it isn't the Grand. But being at those events is really right. Well, that may be someone's goal. I mean, as an amateur, my goal when I started certainly wasn't the Grand. My goal was like, wow, I've never done this. Let's see what I can do. Let's see. So I just think that the goal, it's a very special atmosphere for us amateurs to be in, to be around pros and to be watching pros. It's a unique, special event to be at. But
Ray, let me ask you a question. In your field trial career, I'd be really interested to know this what you think. The dogs that have all the bazillion derby points, do a lot of those make really, really good FC, AFCs or NFCs, or do they kind of fizzle out after a really, really good derby career? What do you think the percentage of that is?
Ooh, that's a good. I couldn't tell you the percentage, but I could tell you in my experience, we had a couple really good derby dogs, and they went on to be good all-age dogs. One of them won a national. One of them's in the Hall of. The other one's in the Hall of Fame. but they weren't trained specifically to be derby dogs. They were trained to be all age dogs, and we ran derbies in the meantime. They weren't trained just to run derbies. They weren't trained just for started or just for junior or just for senior. Even if your goal is that, I think it's funny if you get a dog and your goals can change pretty quickly. So just kind of keep the end goal in mind. But there certainly has been, back to your question, there's certainly been a lot of high point derby dogs that haven't made all age dogs, and there's been some really good ones. And I think the dogs, how their training is managed, how their temperament is, because you can certainly do a lot of damage long term by continuing to run a dog that's having a problem. Not watching field trials, not watching birds, line manners. There's a dog that was high point derby dog that he's got his FCA, AFC now, but he's been continually battling a creeping. Not a dog that I've ever had my hands on, but he continually dog's 8, 9, 10 years old, and the dog still creeps. By running all those derbies and exposing him to doing things wrong in an environment that you can't correct them so many times, you can certainly create long-term problems. Any good derby dog that we've had sat still, watched their birds, and was reliable in the water. And if any of those things started to slip, then we'd stop running them.
Yep. So you manage their career, they ended up being nice dogs. And that's my whole point, is manage their career, quit worrying about the ribbon in a time frame, and train a dog for longevity and just slow down.
I would say the number one mistake that I see or hear and see a lot is people that are too quick to test their dog or not willing to stop if something comes up. Noise or creeping or cheating or something like that. And the more times you expose them to doing something wrong, especially when you make them do it in training, that's when they start to learn they're at the test, and that's when you're going to have a long-term behavioral issue to deal with, where if you see it, you can take a couple weekends off, and maybe it never turns into anything more than a one-time deal. But the unwillingness to kind of take a step back, because you want to chase those ribbons, you want to chase those points, and you do yourself more long-term harm than good by doing that, for sure.
And some of that stuff you can't fix. You just have to try to maintain it if it gets too bad. And you're already crossed
Band-Aids
that
and
bridge.
iodine.
Yeah, lots of it.
Well, that's a really good segue into the next one, unless you guys have more to speak on that topic.
We're good.
Fixes for creeping at the line. This comes from Jeff Meyer.
Don't let it start.
Yeah, I mean, try not to let it. But if it happens, then you have to deal with it. So we have a drill that we used to go back to, and again, back to the yard. If we had a dog that was creeping, again, if it's only happening at a test or trial, you need to stop running it for a while. But there's a drill and training, and we would have a gunner with a pistol and a pile of bumpers, 40, 50 yards away. And we would, we called it a steadiness or a noise drill, and used it for both things. What we're trying to do is create the expectation that the dog doesn't get to go until he sits or he's quiet, right? So often these dogs that creep or they move or they're noisy, you correct them and you send them, you correct them and you send them. And it becomes this deal where the dog just is like, hey, hit me so I can go get the bird. Well, if we're going to actually change that behavior, we have to reprogram. So to reprogram, we would have that, like I said, that gunner out there, he would shoot and throw. The dog moves or makes noise, you make your correction, and the next time he doesn't get to go, the gunner rethrows, probably without a shot. Dog moves again, gets another correction or whatever. It's mostly a patience thing, but there is some correction involved. And they don't get to go until they sit to your standard. And then once they sit to your standard, they get to make the retrieve. So that may be, you may literally just flip a bumper 2 feet to make it so boring that until they gets them to quit moving or quit whining or whatever it is. And you can start to see them draw this connection that they don't get to go until they sit still. And this happens over the course of several days. They're not doing any marks in the field. And once and then you are creating success and failure, right? We touched on that in the last episode a little bit. I feel like dogs learn from episodes of success and failure. So when they move, there's your failure. Now you simplify the task. They don't move. Now they have success. So I'm trying to create episodes of that to hopefully make that dog start to draw the connection. Hey, when I sit here quietly, I get to go get that bird. And then we take that into the field. I mean, you may do that for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. And then we take that to the field, and I'm having the same standard when I throw marks. And I'm going to start with singles, and I'm going to shoot and throw. And if the dog moves, we're going to rethrow with less excitement. And really try to reinforce what they just learned in the field or in the yard and take that to the field and just try to reprogram them that they don't get to go unless they sit still.
This episode is brought to you by Dave, a banking app that's leveling the financial playing field. Because when you download Dave, you could get up to $500 in 5 minutes or less. No credit check, no late fees. It's part of Dave's Extra Cash account. Advance the money you need with no interest and then settle up later. Download Dave today at dave.com/Spotify. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Eligibility criteria and instant transfer fees apply. Banking services provided by Evolve, member FDIC.
Harper hits one in the air, left back, it goes! Harper, the swing of his life!
MLB playoffs are near, and you know what that means, Alex?
Yep, Flippin' Bats will be staying up late and having all the fun.
From breaking down the most important stories in games, nobody's done what he's doing. Nobody, not even Babe Ruth.
To interviewing baseball's biggest stars.
I felt like I was pitching more stress. I was trying to be so perfect.
No one covers America's pastime like us.
So as we sprint towards this year's World Series on Fox, please make sure to listen, follow, and subscribe to Flippin' Bats with Ben Verlander and me, Alex Curry.
Baseball is fun, and so are we. We're going to have fun, dang it! We'll talk to you soon.
Did any of that make sense? Did I ramble on too much?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, for sure. And then, and sometimes what we do is in like an AKC setup, I do like a reverse healing deal. The mark comes out and you're standing up, no gun, no nothing. You're just standing up and you got a collar and the mark comes out, the mark hits. Then I slowly try to almost sneak away to the back. I start backing up. And if that dog doesn't come with me, it gets collar pressure pretty much continuous until that dog catches up with me. And then he'll think she's getting sent. Then I may back up real slowly again with collar pressure. When that dog gets to me, I let off on the collar pressure. Now your marking may obviously go down doing this type of stuff, but you're working on its creeping, right? And eventually they start marking. So every time a mark comes out, it hits, you slowly back away because you have to have that dog. When it creeps, it doesn't care whether you're there or not. There's zero part of a team that when that dog does that stuff. So we need to keep that relationship with, hey, I'm the boss, you're the dog. You need to keep your relationship with me. You need to be at my side. And if I move, you move with me. And that's really helped me over the years deal with some of those dogs like that. And if the dog, you start backing up, you give the dog collar pressure, and it doesn't come with you, then you're not giving enough pressure to change the behavior. So the pressure comes up until that dog comes back with you.
So we did a very similar drill. We used to call it automatic healing drill. And the only difference, we would preemptively teach it in the yard and use like a low level continuous same thing when the dog's not next to you, out of their circle, right? And there's no command. So they get told to heal once. Anytime they're outside the zone, it's low continuous till they're back next to you, let off the pressure. And so that was kind of the preemptive deal that we would do and then do exactly what you're talking about. And when you've taught it like that, that low continuous usually has a pretty strong effect and those dogs will try to jump back pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah.
And the other thing, taught him in the yard a little bit, if you have a dog, an older dog that's still creeping, and is sometimes you can drag your foot a little bit on the mat or on the grass. And we would teach them that dragging that foot a little bit came with that low continuous pressure. So if they started to move in a trial and I would drag my foot a little bit, a lot of times I could stop them.
Yeah, we do the same thing, and not a lot. You can't do it too much, but we do the same thing. And that was a good point. When I do that, I don't go heel, 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 heel. I say heel. When I first teaching it, I say heel, and I start moving back, and I say it very quietly. After they know what is expected of them, I quit talking. They have to pay attention to where I'm at. Period. So
as far as creeping goes, do you expect perfection? Like if their butt comes off the mat at all, or how much do they have to move for you to take issue with?
That's a hard topic, because there's some dogs that if they're too steady, they don't mark very well, and almost every dog's got its own almost like style at the line, if you would say. And I've corrected some of those dogs their feet were pattering and stuff. Now I'm not talking about moving forward and creeping. I'm talking about maybe some feet pattering, that sort of thing. And if I make their feet quit moving, they couldn't find a hamburger in a phone booth. But if I let them be them, they're pretty good. Now, going into a national event, I'm not sure I wouldn't let them do it too much, but you still have to let them be them a little bit. And then because if you make them be super steady, they just couldn't mark as well. They weren't the same dog.
I think some of that kind of stuff, like what age are we talking about here? Are we talking about as a young dog and a puppy? I would love to have a 0. They would just sit like a little statue all the time and try to teach that from the beginning. Some dogs, like you said, they develop their own personality. Some of them might pat their feet a little bit or crouch slightly, but if they're not moving forward, we think, okay, well, as long as they don't move forward, we're okay with a little bit of this. So it kind of takes on, and they have their own standard. Sometimes we used to get a lot of older dogs in for training, and so sometimes your standard evolves a little bit with the dog as it gets older. I would love to say if I was starting a puppy from scratch, I would like to start with that no movement, and but the reality of it is sometimes there is a little bit, and you have to find what's going to be, what's too much. I tend to say 0 forward movement. If I have a dog that I know has a tendency to move a lot or is just antsy, if I let them pat their feet but they don't move forward, and that takes a little bit of that movement out of it without giving up creeping or bird watching, then I'm okay with it. So that's the kind of stuff that that'll evolve as your dog gets older. The first time you make the dog sit and it doesn't mark perfectly, I wouldn't say, oh, well, no, see, he can't mark when he sits still, so we're not going to make him do that anymore. That's not something that happens like one setup and you change your mind. That's got to be.
Yeah, that takes, and that's what I meant. That takes time. And you'll find out. I've had dogs that go into the Grand and to the National that if I made them sit like a statue, they weren't worth a damn. But that's, like you said, an older dog that we've understood that and we know where we're standing. Young dogs, we like to see them sit real quiet, because eventually a lot of dogs there will be some sort of movement at some point in their life. I have a few, like Red, Georgie's brother, doesn't move a muscle. He just turns his head, and that's not something that we harped on with him. That's just what he does. He doesn't make a peep. He doesn't move a muscle. I've never seen a dog so steady in my life. And that's just how he is. So, and Flash is not as steady as that, but he's pretty steady now. But he's not as steady as that. And Isla, Georgie's mom, is just like Red. Identical.
Yeah.
Never moved a muscle.
All right.
It's just genetics.
Good stuff. All right, next question. We've got Landon Poplin. He says, do you prefer more of a methodical dog or a fire breather when it comes to training, hunt tests? And do you think the sport will remain a lab game, or do you guys see more versatile breeds joining the sport in the future?
I want to. You go ahead
I want a
first
fast
there,
dog.
Ray.
I mean, I'm not saying there isn't some
Yeah.
really good methodical ones, but my personal preference is a dog that runs hard and is stylish, and I'd rather miss a keyhole once for a dog being too fast than one that trots out to the birds.
Yeah, and I'm with Ray. I like the fast dog. I like the dog that's got really good momentum. I like those dogs. But what I don't like is a dog that's like that has zero team player in them. That drives me insane. All they care about is themselves. So I do like that. Now, the more methodical dogs, I'm going to tell you, they're hard to beat. Sometimes they never make a mistake. But I personally, I like a dog that runs a little bit harder, has a good, thought process, that sort of thing. And now I have plenty of dogs that their natural style is just slow and methodical, and they've ended up being great dogs. But for me personally, I like the dog that's got more power, more want to, more go. But be careful. But all these amateurs, and I know Pilo, I'm like, I want that fire-breathing dragon. Like, be careful what you wish for, because we call those dogs, a lot of them dogs pro dogs. I mean, you could put me in a NASCAR car and go around the track, but I guarantee you I wreck it. It's the same thing. Everybody wants that higher fire-breathing dragon until you got one, and then you're going to be putting questions on this Facebook page about how do I control my fire-breathing dragon. So
yeah, running fast does not substitute control. I mean, those dogs they have to, maybe they take a little longer. Maybe they're trying to sit fast and it just takes them a little longer because of all the momentum they have or the speed they have. But, speed does not mean that you don't have to try or you get to be out of control just because you run fast. And, there's a big difference between methodical and what I would call methodical and slow too. So, you get some dogs that are just really, the ones, there's a lot of really, really good methodical dogs like you're talking about. What I would say I don't like is the ones that just really look like they don't want to be there. And I would not say that about a methodical dog. Methodical dogs, they run, their ears are up, they're happy to do the work, they're just not as flashy.
Yeah. The ones you were talking about, like the man-made dogs that we've made run straight and we've made do this, and it's more of a job for them. I'm with you, Ray. I don't care for those as much.
All right, we've got time for one more question. This comes from Tanner Whitmire. He says, what does a full week of training look like for a young finished master dog that's getting ready to start running the Grand? How many setups on average are they running? And are they working on other things such as drills and your well-established grand dogs like Flash? Do they maybe not train as hard as the younger dogs besides when they are getting ready to run a national event? So it's kind of a two-parter there.
Yeah. This will be really interesting for what Ray did with the field trial dogs and what we do with our hunt test dogs. My more advanced dogs, the Flash, the Crews, the Flashes and stuff, we typically run one really good setup a day. It involves 4 marks, 3 blinds, that sort of thing. And usually it's just one really good setup a day. The younger dogs we've got typically do 2 a day where they got a handling setup and they got a marking setup, that sort of thing. But the more advanced dogs typically get one really good setup a day, and we're just tweaking, maintaining, trying to advance a little bit, not overdoing it, that sort of thing. And my older dogs, they go every day. We take them. Flash is 8 now. He goes every day. If you don't take him, if he's not going to the vet to be bred, he's going to train. And if you don't take him to train, he thinks he's getting bred, and he's just a disaster. So we take them every day. Now, the older dogs, the older ones that maybe have some joint issues and that sort of thing, we may back off a little bit, yes. But if they're in good physical condition, they go typically every day, and that's their job. That's what they do.
With field trial dogs, we used to do 2 to 3 setups a day, depending on if we were on land. A lot of times we could get 3 done in a day with 24 dogs. If we were in the water, usually it was 2. We were doing a lot of separate, marks and blinds. So we weren't, it wasn't, 6 or 7 birds in one setup. So we might do, do a water triple and a water blind. That would be 2 setups. We might do, 2 land triples and a double land blind one day if it was cool and, we could stay on land. So probably, but most of the time things were separated. We did do marks with marks and blinds combination once in a while, but majority of the time they were separated. But so a normal week would be probably 10 to 12 setups, for the dogs that are training. As they got older, it was a little bit dog dependent. Once they got to be 7 or 8, a lot of times they would maybe get one day off a week. Like they'd get Wednesday off. They train Monday, Tuesday, get Wednesday off, train Thursday, Friday. We did a lot of conditioning. So with the 4-wheeler, and that would be a whole nother podcast. But we would condition 2 to 3 days a week. So sometimes it was 15 minutes, and we'd build up to 45 minutes. But so those older dogs would maybe do a little less field work and a little more conditioning. Younger dogs would probably get a little bit more on the setup lines, and they'd probably only condition one or a couple days a week. We'd condition on the weekend, so Saturday morning they'd always get conditioned, and then they'd have a day off afterwards. So it depended, as the dogs got older, we get 9, 10, we had my last year running. I finished a dog in the national that was a national finalist at 11 years old. So, those guys, and he was, you had to manage and maintain, and he didn't do every setup every day. If we did a bunch of land, a lot of times those older dogs would do 1 land setup a day because they didn't need the repetition and the pounding. Now, when I say older, we're talking 9, 10-year-old dog, or a dog that has a physical ailment that we were having to keep an eye on. So it was really a little bit dog dependent, a lot of conditioning. We tried to limit their miles once they were, they'd get days off. They'd run a trial, they'd get Monday off. They might get Thursday off before the trial. It was actually the right year afterwards. We had one of the dogs that we had ended up being the High Point Open dog, High Point amateur dog. She had 50 amateur points, and she would train 1 setup a week and condition 2 days a week, and had 50 amateur points. And so she was a pretty special dog. Actually, she was just elected into the Hall of Fame last year. So again, it takes a special dog to not have to train very often, but
yeah. And with that being said too, sometimes we'll do a morning setup where it'll be 4 marks and 2 or 3 blinds, and then it would be obviously get hot in the afternoon. Then we'll move over and we'll just run a water blind.
Yep.
So that's technically 2. So
Yep.
you run it like just a simple water blind.
Yep.
Not simple, just a single water blind. And I will tell you, in my career, there's been not a lot, but there's been a handful of dogs like this amateur dog. I'll bet that amateur dog, if you'd have trained her every single day, she probably would not have been the same dog. And there's some dogs that they just can't train every day. They don't have that fire for it. But if you could figure it out and manage their career, sometimes them dogs are fine training 2 or 3 days a week, and that's all they need to keep their attitude up, and then they perform great. Those dogs they're kind of like the Allen Iversons of the dog world. You're like, practice? What do you mean practice? And that's just kind of how they are. And if you can recognize that as a trainer and manage their career, And it drives you nuts to leave them there. You put them on the trailer, you tie them out, and that's what they do for the day. But, we're paid to train the dog, and we do whatever the dog needs to get done to perform. And if that dog only needs trained 2 or 3 days a week, that's all it needs to be trained 2 or 3 days a week. And there's some dogs that have to be trained every day because that's what they love to do. So you've got to recognize that as a trainer, pull that choke, pump the gas, and figure out how to make that dog run. And I'll bet you that amateur dog, if it trained 5 days a week, it probably wasn't the same dog.
Her problem was more physical. She was, she was 10 years old and she had a bad shoulder, and she wanted to work, and she could. So for her, it was more making her limit her miles so you could go, and she got single staked and all those things just to try to minimize the extra pounding. And she was the kind of dog that if she had held up, you could have trained her every day at 10 years old and she would have loved it. But it was for her, it was more of a physical thing. And she was a Grady daughter, and she was one of those that she just always wanted to do the right thing. So, even though she wanted to train, she didn't have to, and she would still make the right decision.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is train the dog in front of you. Just because you might have that dog that's a little bit on the lazy side when it comes to training, but comes up really, really good at a test, and comes up really good that kicks the crap out of the test. You have to recognize that as a trainer. And if training that dog, and now I'm talking an advanced dog, that has all the tools, and if that advanced dog only needs 2 or 3 days of training to keep its attitude up, you need to recognize that and train that dog instead of, hey, my buddy's going out every day, you're going to do this, and then you just end up mentally melting that dog down.
Yep, I agree
with
that.
So you need to recognize 100%. It. Yeah.
All right.
Well, is that it?
I think that's going to do it for today, Ray. Thank you for joining us. It's been great, these 2 podcasts.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. It was it's been fun getting to discuss what we all love, and just thank you. Happy to do it anytime, and as always, feed Propline.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Elliot. Another great podcast. Elliot, you got anything to say?
I don't think so. It's just, this is, from an amateur perspective, all of this information is almost overload. I think I'm going to have to go back and listen to all these episodes 2 or 3 times each to digest it. You guys are doing a great job.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Everybody have a good night. Thank you for listening. See you at the line. Take that aim.